Davy Crockett. Chapter 1, Young Davy. Davy Crockett was born on August 17, 1787, in Greene County, Tennessee. In 1787 America was a new nation. Most of the territory was a wilderness. Davy Crockett was born in the wilderness. His father, John Crockett, was an Irish immigrant. He fought in the American Revolution. He was a very courageous man. Davy had a difficult childhood. His family was poor. When he was 12 years old, his father said, "Davy, our family doesn't have any money. You must go to work as a cattle herder." "All right, father," said Davy. "I'm happy to help the family." Davy traveled 400 miles on foot. He took cattle from Tennessee to other places. When he finished his work, he was far from home. He was lost. Davy walked 400 miles. When he returned home, he was very tired. Davy gave his father the money he made. His father was happy and said, "Thank you, Davy. Now we have some money for the winter months." "I can do it again to help the family," Davy answered. The years passed. Davy went to school when he had time. He spent most of his time hunting in the forest. He was the best shooter and hunter in Tennessee. He entered many shooting competitions and won them all. He called his rifle Old Betsy. For years Davy hunted bears and other wild animals. He was a trapper. Once he hunted 100 bears in 6 months. It was dangerous to hunt bears. Davy was very courageous and strong. He knew the forest well. The Indians were his good friends. He ran fast and was a strong fighter. He fought with the wild cats of the mountains. Some people said that one day Davy saw a raccoon in a tree. He wanted to shoot it, but the raccoon saw him and said, "Wait a minute. Are you Davy Crockett?" Davy answered, "Yes, I am." The raccoon answered, "Then don't shoot. I'll come down from the tree." And the raccoon came down from the tree. Chapter 2, The Creek Where. Everyone liked Davy Crockett. He was always happy, with a big smile. He was honest and always helped others. Davy was a tall man. He wore a coonskin cap, buckskin trousers and a buckskin jacket. He always carried his long rifle, Old Betsy. In 1806 Davy married Polly Finley. She was a school teacher. They had 2 sons and a daughter, John, Joseph, and Judith. After a few years, the Crockett family moved into the Tennessee Hills. The Tennessee Hills were near hostile Indian country. In 1812 the war between the United States and Britain began. The Mohawk and Creek Indians fought with the British against the Americans. The American General Andrew Jackson organized a small army. He wanted to fight the Creek Indians and the British. Davy fought with this army. He was a scout because he knew the territory well. His work as a scout was very important. Davy traveled across Tennessee, the Mississippi Territory, Florida and Louisiana with General Jackson's army. The Battle of New Orleans was a big victory for General Jackson and the Americans. The war ended in 1814. The British lost the war. The Indians lost their territories and went away. New American families settled in the Tennessee Hills. At the end of the war Davy returned home to his family. Unfortunately, his wife Polly died. Life was again difficult for Davy. He worked as a trapper and took care of his 3 children. After some time, Davy met Meg McKinnock. Meg's father was an American trapper. Her mother was a Cherokee Indian. Davy fell in love and married her. They had twins. Davy named the twins George and Washington, in honor of America's first president. There were now 5 children in the Crockett family. Chapter 3, Davy enters politics. Davy and his big family wanted to live in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. Davy bought a covered wagon. He and his family put all of their things inside the wagon: chairs, tables, beds, clothing and many other things. 4 strong horses pulled the big wagon. Davy and his wife sat in the front. The 5 children were inside the wagon. After traveling in the forests and mountains, they arrived in Lawrenceburg. This was their new home. Davy opened a mill. He was a hard worker. His neighbors liked him. Everybody in Lawrenceburg liked him. He became a representative of the town government. He was very popular. People liked listening to his stories about hunting bears and about the War of 1812. They admired his honesty and courage. Davy was different from other politicians. His speeches were never boring. His message was clear. He spoke to the people in simple language. He dressed like them too. He always wore his coonskin cap and his buckskin trousers and jacket. One day at an important meeting he didn't know what to say. So he looked at the people and said, "Today, I am like a man trying to drink water from an empty barrel. I'll tell you a funny story and then we can go home." Davy soon became a representative of the government of Tennessee. Now he was in politics. He helped his people in many ways. At first, many politicians laughed at Davy because he never wore a suit. After some time, these politicians admired and respected him. Davy was an honest man. Everyone believed what he said. His buckskin jacket had two big pockets. In his right pocket Davy had a bottle of whiskey. When he met his friends, he gave them some whiskey. In those days, it was common to give some whiskey to friends. Chapter 4, Congressman Crockett. Davy often went to Nashville, the capital of Tennessee. In Nashville, he worked for the Tennessee government. One day, while Davy was working for the Tennessee government, a big flood destroyed his mill. This was terrible. He was very unhappy because he lost a lot of money. When he returned to Lawrenceburg, he started a new type of work. This time he made barrels. He sold these barrels in New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans was about 400 miles away. To go to New Orleans, he traveled on the Mississippi River. He had a big boat to carry the barrels. It was difficult to travel on the Mississippi River. There were many dangers. One day his boat had a bad accident. It began to sink. Davy almost drowned. He lost his boat and his barrels, but he didn't lose his life. In 1827 there was a big election in Tennessee. Davy Crockett became a United States Congressman. This was a great honor for him. In the United States Congress, he represented the people of Tennessee. He traveled to Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. Davy was very happy to be a congressman. He wanted to help his people. There were congressmen who wanted to take land away from the Fox Indians of Tennessee. Davy protected these Indians. He fought against dishonest congressmen. The Fox Indians cannot live without their land. Davy shouted, "I must defend all the American people of Tennessee, the whites and the Indians." After months of hard work, Davy was not able to help the Fox Indians. The U.S. Congress made a law that took away land from the Indians. Davy was very angry. He hated injustice. In 1835 he left the U.S. Congress. Chapter 5, Texas. In 1835 the Crockett family left Tennessee. They put all their things in a big covered wagon and they traveled for many days. They finally arrived in Texas. At that time, Texas belonged to Mexico. At first, the Mexican government was happy with the American settlers. They cultivated the land. Many settlers went to Texas because land was very cheap. With a little money, a settler bought a lot of land. More and more Americans went to Texas. There were about 20,000 American settlers in eastern Texas. There were only 5,000 Mexicans. The Mexican government did not like this. There were too many Americans. Mexico decided to close its borders. The American settlers were very angry. In 1834, the Mexican General Santa Anna became the dictator of Mexico. He was a cruel man. He sent his soldiers to the Mexican border. He did not want American settlers to enter Mexico. By 1834, there were more than 30,000 Americans living in Texas. They wanted Texas to be an independent American state. They did not want to live under a cruel Mexican dictator. Davy and his family now lived in Texas. They were happy in their new home. They wanted the independence of Texas, too. One day Davy heard that the Mexicans wanted to attack Fort Alamo. The Alamo was a Spanish church and fort near San Antonio, in western Texas. There were Texans and American soldiers at Fort Alamo. There were also women and children at the fort. War was in the air. Davy knew he must fight for the independence of Texas.